right, so I want to go through who I think is going to win each division and then also the wildcard winners from the NFC and AFC. I'm going to start with the NFC, and we'll start with the last place team. So, in the North, I'm going to go with the Vikings. I think this is probably the most common answer that you'll get. The Vikings, they lost their rookie quarterback for the season, and Sam Darnold will get you as far as Sam Darnold can. Next, you got the Packers. So I think this may be a surprise to some people. With the Packers, I know they had a great end to the season. They beat the Cowboys in the playoffs. I'm still a little unconvinced on Jordan Love and the team. This kind of reminds me of the Jaguars a couple years ago. They had a really bad first half and a great second half with Trevor Lawrence. And then the next year, he was not so good again. So we'll see. In second place, I got the Chicago Bears. And I also have them as a wild card spot. So I really believe in the Caleb hype. I think it's more than just hype. I think he's really good. And I think the step up from Justin Fields will be noticeable. The defense was pretty solid last year, especially in the second half. And they added weapons on top of that. Keenan Allen, we'll see how much he's got left in the tank. Gerald Everett, another great spot. And then number one, I've got the Lions winning the division. An amazing roster, like the coach. I'm really high on them in the playoffs as well. It could be their year. We'll see. I would say, though, they're a favorite to make it to the NFC Championship. So next up, the NFC East. So number 4, I've got the Giants. Again, I think this is something that most people would agree with. The Giants, you have no Saquon, and now you're going to get more Daniel Jones. I hate the sound of that. I think they clearly have the worst roster. And next, you got the Commanders. So I think this is really their first hope that they've had in a while. With Jaden Daniels coming in, of course, the new coach. So hopefully you'll see some improvements to the defense with Dan Quinn. And I still think they're a couple years away, but maybe they can be a little better from last year. So these two, the last two in the division, I was torn between them. But I'm going to put the Cowboys second. Reason being, they didn't do anything on paper that we can see to get better. In fact, you could argue they got worse if you just look at their roster. I don't like the situation with Jerry Jones always making noise and Dak Prescott. That's still something they have to figure out, still something looming over the season. Losing Jason Kelce is a big deal. I mean, that's a Hall of Fame center, but I believe the offensive line will be able to bounce back and still be pretty good. I did like their draft. Adding 2 young secondary players is big for them. And also I like that they brought in 2 new coordinators, especially hoping that Sirianni will hand over the play-calling rights to the new offensive coordinator. I'm also still a believer in Jalen Hurts. I think the biggest thing for them was just getting a break from that season and all of the noise, and I think they'll be back at first. So in the NFC South, I've got the Saints at last. I don't like anything about the Saints right now. Watching their games last year, got to catch a good amount of them, and pretty rough watch. Derek Carr was not the answer that they thought he would be last year, and I have no reason to believe he will this year. They're older, and with their salary cap situation, they have no room to get anybody. I really don't see anything that would make me think they're going to be competitive. So, number 3, I've got the Panthers. So the reason I have the Panthers jumping the Saints is because I really like them bringing in Dave Canales as the head coach. So last year he was with the Bucs. He had Baker on a really good stretch of his last year. In addition to that, he was with the Seahawks when Geno had his best year. I really think that him coming in is going to help Bryce Young a lot. Adding in Xavier Legette and some other guys like Deontay Johnson to the offense, I still think they're not going to be very good, but maybe 5-6 wins. So second, I have the Bucs. Yet again, on Dave Canales, I don't like them losing them, so I do think it takes them a little bit of a step back, but that roster is still competitive. They still have some guys in place, same quarterback. We'll see. I don't think they're good enough to make the playoffs, but still a good team. So that leaves the Falcons at number 1. I do really like Kirk Cousins coming over there with the system they're bringing in. Raheem Morris, the new head coach, will, I think, improve that defense. And they also brought in Zach Robinson, who used to be with the Rams. So I imagine they'll run that similar West Coast system that you'll see Shanahan run and McDaniel with the Dolphins run. And I think Kirk is a perfect fit for that. So hopefully he can get some of those weapons involved, and the defense, again, I think will be improved. So lastly, I've got the NFC West. I think the Cardinals are in last place. Now, I think they'll be improved from last year, just from the mere fact that hopefully Kyler Murray will be here the whole season. I like getting Marvin Harrison. He seems like a can't-miss prospect. But honestly, they just have a long way to go to get where they want to be. So number 3, I have the Seahawks. This was a really tough division to me to decide between the top 3. The Seahawks are they have so much talent on their team. To me, the difference between them and the other top two teams is their rookie head coach and Geno Smith. I'm not a huge believer in that combination being good enough to get you over the hump of the Rams and the Niners. So with that being said, I've got the Niners at number 2. Why number 2? I still think they make the playoffs as a wild card, and they do have an amazing roster. What I don't like is they have a lot of noise around them. Brock Purdy, I do think, is a solid quarterback. I think he's better than most. Is he a difference maker? That's where I draw the line and say no. And to me, going through another long playoff run, it's been 4 or 5 years now where they're very deep in the playoffs. It's really hard to stay healthy and continue to keep your guys focused and ready to make another run. So to me, I think this is the end of their contending run. So that'll put the Rams at number 1. To me, the big thing here is you've got the best coach and the best quarterback in that division. That's just my belief. I like in the draft, they added 2 pass rushers with their first 2 picks. There's a lot to like there. There are some questions. With the offensive line was banged up in the training camp, and their left tackle, Eric Jackson, is suspended for the first 2 games. They also had to trade Ernest Jones, who was their leading tackler last year. No doubt there are questions, but I do think the core pieces will be enough to have them win the division. All right, so in the AFC, I'm going to start with the North. And coming up in last, I've got the Browns. Deshaun Watson has shown no reason to believe in him in the past couple of years. I, again, think he will be mediocre. Do they have an amazing defense? Yes. But with that quarterback and having no Nick Chubb for the foreseeable future, I think it puts him in last. Really close with third place, who's the Steelers. So the Steelers have a similar situation where I think they have a great defense and their quarterback's not great. Whoever it is, Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, it's not where you want to be. But with Mike Tomlin's winning record and that defense, I'm just going to give them the edge over the Browns by maybe 1 game. So in second place, I have the Ravens in the wild card. So I still think they're a contender. I'll talk about the reasons why I have the Bengals at number 1 over them. But the Ravens, I still believe they're a contender. They do have an amazing roster. Lamar Jackson, whatever people want to say about him, he's a winner, and he makes plays. But the reason I have the Bengals at number 1, a big reason, obviously, is Joe Burrow. So Joe Burrow should be healthy this year. No injuries in the training camp for the first time in a long time, and I'm expecting a lot from him. And the other key factor, I believe, is the last place schedule. They're playing a schedule that is so much easier than the Ravens. I think they'll just be able to rack up some wins that maybe the other guys can't in the division. They do have to figure out Jamar Chase, though. So in the AFC East, I'm going to have the Patriots in last. I think this is probably the most agreed-upon thing in anyone's mind in the NFL right now. They're not good. The roster is pretty bad, pretty trash. And they're young on top of that. So I think it's going to be a long year. Third place, I've got the Dolphins. Again, I think this is a situation between the second and third team. I think it's going to come down to 1 game between the Dolphins and Jets. They actually play very, very late in the season, and I think that's going to be the difference. Regardless, I'm going to go with the Dolphins at third. They didn't show that they can win big games last year. They lost against the best teams. They lost late in the season because of the cold weather. At least it seems that way. And they're going to hope that Tua stays healthy again, which last year he was able to do. Can he do it again? I don't know. So that means the Jets at second. They got an improved offensive line. They get Aaron Rodgers back, which is the big difference. I don't think he's going to come back and be a star. I do think he's going to be better than Zach Wilson. So to me, those things with that defense, I think they'll beat the Dolphins by 1 game in that division, but they're still both going to miss the playoffs. So that puts the Bills at number 1. Did they lose Stephon Diggs and some defensive pieces? Yes. I still think their head coach, Sean McDermott, finds a way every single year to have a competitive defense. Not too worried about it. And Josh Allen does have turnover problems. Sometimes he makes some poor decisions, but I still think he's at least a top 4 quarterback in the NFL, probably higher. So I'm just going to believe in them to get it done this year. So in the AFC South, we've got the Titans at last. Now, they've been aggressive this offseason, which you like to see it from what most people think is a last-place team. They've gotten a collection of good players, but not great. Calvin Ridley, Hopkins is back, Tony Pollard, a lot of guys like that. I think they'll be not an easy game on anybody's schedule, but I do still think they're last in that division. So in third, I got the Jags. I'm not a huge believer in the Jaguars. It starts with Trevor Lawrence for me. I don't think he's amazing. I don't think he's terrible. I think he's somewhere in the middle there. To me, It's not that they got far worse. I just think the second place team got a little better, or at least maybe they will. So that second place team is the Colts. I see a lot of boom or bust potential here, obviously, with Anthony Richardson. A lot of people have been saying it. His preseason, you look at one drive, and he looks amazing. And the next drive, he looks terrible and like he's not ready. So part of my factoring into this is that they also have Joe Flacco as their backup. So in the situation that Anthony Richardson gets hurt or is not getting the job done, at least they have a backup that I believe in. And they were one game away last year, one pass away last year from making the playoffs. So I'm going to have them making the wild card this year, just squeaking in. And that'll put the Texans at number 1. CJ Stroud is special. I'm not the only one to say it, and I won't be the last. But I think that guy with the improved roster, bringing in Stephon Diggs, that defense, and that head coach, there's just a lot to like there. And I'm going to trust that CJ Stroud's going to get past a sophomore slump. I do have one tiny concern with the Texans, just that Stephon Diggs has shown that in his 2 past places, he's gotten unhappy, and that can cause some problems. He's an amazing talent, and he'll help them for as long as he's happy. All right, so lastly, I've got the AFC West. So I've got the Broncos at 4th. Again, I think there's 2 teams, the 4th and the 3rd place team. I think it comes down to 1 or 2 games. So I'm going to go with the Broncos at 4th. Reason being, they have a rookie quarterback. That's a large thing for me. Bo Nix, he did look pretty solid in the preseason. He earned his starting spot. But we've seen this before. Guys that look good in the preseason don't always pan out this way. Malik Willis comes to mind right now. To me, they'll look better than last year just because Sean Payton should be melding better with this quarterback compared to Russell Wilson. So that means I've got the Raiders at number 3. Gardner Minshew is what he is. He should be a backup, but I guess he can do for a year. Part of the reason I have them above the Broncos is they have some studs. I mean, Devontae Adams and Max Crosby, those 2 alone are pretty damn good. But once again, I don't think they're competitive in the grand scheme of things. So number 2, I've got the Chargers, and I do have them making the wild card. This has been a pretty popular pick, but I do agree with it. Bringing in Harbaugh it's a great move. He's succeeded everywhere he's been, college or the NFL. I love the idea of him fixing that defense, number 1. With Brandon Staley, they were bottom 5 defense every single year he was there. It's hard for me to believe that Harbaugh won't at least be in the middle of the pack of defense. In addition to that, I love them drafting Joe Alt. Justin Herbert, I am a believer in a lot of his talent, and I think in a lot of ways this is a prove-it year for him to say, I've got the guy in place. I don't have many more excuses, so not many weapons there, but I think they'll figure that out. So that leaves the Chiefs at number 1. 2 things, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Those 2 alone, you're going to be competitive. And when you have the best quarterback in the world, you're probably going to win the division. I think he has that same effect where the same way you didn't bet against Tom Brady, don't bet against Patrick Mahomes. So to wrap it up, in the NFC, my division winners are the Lions, the Eagles, the Falcons, and the Rams. And then my wildcard winners in no particular order, got the Bears, the Cowboys, and the Niners. And then over in the AFC, my division winners are the Bengals, the Bills, the Texans, and the Chiefs. And my wildcard winners are the Ravens, the Colts, and the Chargers. The wildcard teams were difficult for me. They were definitely, like every year, it's going to come down to a game or even a tiebreaker for those last spots, that 7th seed for both the AFC and the NFC. And of course, there is that long-known rule now where half the teams that made it to the playoffs the year before, they don't make it the next year. There's going to be teams that no one saw coming being as good as they are or as being as bad as they are. You see it every year, and I'm sure there's going to be at least a couple things here that I had no idea it was going to happen. But hopefully I can get at least a couple right.